We were sitting around my dining table like a proper family when Mark cleared his throat and exchanged that look with Neil. When my eldest son announced that I needed to sell my house and move to a nursing home so they could use the money for their new homes, I felt something inside me shift into a different gear entirely. I said I'd think about it, walked them to the door with the same smile I'd worn for 63 years. But I was already calculating. Within a week, I had liquidated $340,000, canceled every automatic payment to my sons, and disappeared from Seattle forever. They came looking for their monthly allowance checks, but found an empty house and a sold sign in the yard. Let me take you back to that Sunday dinner, because you need to understand how perfect everything seemed before it all fell apart. The autumn light was streaming through the windows of the house Margaret and I had bought 31 years ago, the same house where we'd raised Mark and Neil, where we'd hosted Christmas mornings and birthday parties and graduation celebrations. I'd spent all morning preparing pot roast the way Margaret used to make it, setting the table with her good china, the one with the tiny blue flowers she'd inherited from her mother. Mark arrived first with his wife Jessica and their 8-year-old daughter Emma. Neil came 10 minutes later with his wife Sandra and their twin boys, Jake and Michael, who were 6. The grandchildren hugged my legs and called me Grandpa Arthur, and for a moment everything felt exactly the way it should. These Sunday dinners had become sacred to me since Margaret passed 2 years ago. They were the anchor that kept me connected to the family I'd spent decades building and supporting. "Dad, this smells incredible," Mark said, helping Emma into her chair. "You're getting too good at this cooking thing." "Your mother taught me a few things over the years," I replied, carving the roast. "Said I'd need to know how to feed myself eventually." We talked about the kids' school activities, about Jessica's promotion at the marketing firm, about Neil's new construction contracts. I mentioned that I was thinking about taking that Alaskan cruise Margaret and I had always planned, now that I finally had the time. The grandchildren chattered about Halloween costumes and soccer games. Everything was warm and familiar and right. After dinner, while the kids played in the living room and the wives loaded the dishwasher, Mark suggested we sit in the den for coffee. "Dad, Neil and I have been talking, and we wanted to discuss something important with you." That's when the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Mark straightened his shoulders and looked directly at me. "Dad, we've been thinking about your situation here. This house is way too big for one person and frankly, you're not getting any younger. We think it would be best for everyone if you sold this place and moved into a senior living facility." The words hit me like a physical blow, but I kept my expression neutral. "I see." Neil leaned forward, his voice taking on that patient tone people use when they think they're being reasonable. "We've already done some research, Dad. There's a really nice place called Sunset Manor about 20 minutes from here. They have activities, meal plans, medical staff on site. You wouldn't have to worry about maintaining this big house anymore. And the money from selling this house," Mark continued, "well, we figured it could help all of us. Jessica and I have been looking at a bigger place for Emma, and Neil and Sandra need more room now that the twins are getting older. We could use the proceeds to upgrade our housing situations, which would be better for the grandkids too." I sat there, my coffee growing cold in my hands, listening to my sons discuss my future like I was a piece of furniture that needed to be repositioned. They'd already picked out the nursing home. They'd already decided how to spend the money from selling my home. They spoke about it like it was the most natural thing in the world. "We know this is a big decision," Neil said, "but we really think it's what's best. Mom would have wanted you to be somewhere safe, with people looking after you." The mention of Margaret's name in service of their plan was like a knife twisting in my chest. Margaret, who had loved this house, who had planted every flower in the garden, who had chosen every piece of furniture we were sitting on. "We've even arranged for you to tour Sunset Manor next Wednesday," Mark added. "I can pick you up at 10. I looked at my 2 sons, these men I had raised and supported and sacrificed for, and saw strangers. I saw people who viewed me as an inconvenience, a burden to be managed, an asset to be liquidated for their benefit. "I'll think about it," I said quietly. As I watched them leave that evening, hugging their children goodbye, promising to call during the week, I began to remember all the ways I had shaped my life around theirs. I walked through the house after they left, and everywhere I looked, I saw the money I had poured into their lives. The dining room table where we'd just eaten, I'd bought it with the bonus from a project at Boeing, the same bonus I could have used for the European vacation Margaret wanted. Instead, I'd given Mark $15,000 for his wedding. I stood in the kitchen, looking at the refrigerator covered with pictures of my grandchildren, and remembered selling my father's vintage Mustang for $8,000 to pay for Neil's last semester at Washington State. My father had restored that car himself, spending weekends in the garage teaching me about engines and craftsmanship. "This will be yours someday," he'd promised. Instead, it became Neil's degree. In my bedroom, I opened the closet where Margaret's clothes still hung. I'd kept paying for Neil's family health insurance even after he started his own business, $430 every month for 3 years. That was $15,480 that could have gone toward the medical bills when Margaret was sick, toward the experimental treatments insurance wouldn't cover. I touched Margaret's blue dress, the one she'd worn to Mark's wedding. I remembered the conversation we'd had that morning, 6 years ago. "Arthur, we really can't afford $15,000 for the wedding reception," she'd said, looking at our savings account statement. "What about that trip to Ireland we've been planning?" "Mark only gets married once," I'd replied. "Ireland will still be there next year." Ireland was still there. Margaret wasn't. I walked into what used to be Mark's room, now my office, and sat at the desk where I managed the family finances. On the shelf above the desk sat my father's retirement watch, the one Boeing had given him after 37 years of service. I'd promised him I'd pass it down to my sons someday. But when Neil was going through his divorce 3 years ago, he'd needed $5,000 for legal fees. "Just temporarily, Dad," he'd said. "I'll pay you back as soon as the settlement comes through." The settlement had come through 18 months later. Neil bought a new truck instead of paying me back. I never mentioned the money again, but I quietly moved my father's watch to my bedroom safe. Then there was the cabin in the San Juan Islands. Margaret and I had bought it in 1992 with money from a Boeing bonus, planning to retire there someday. We'd spent every anniversary there for 15 years, walking the beach, talking about our future. When Mark's construction company was failing in 2008, he'd needed $75,000 to avoid bankruptcy. "Dad, if I lose the business, we'll lose the house too," he'd pleaded. "Emma will have to change schools." I'd sold the cabin for $82,000 and given him $75,000 of it. His business recovered. He never offered to pay me back, and I never asked. But Margaret cried for 3 days when I told her what I'd done. "That was our place, Arthur," she'd whispered. "That was where we were going to grow old together." Every month, like clockwork, $3,000 to Mark, $3,000 to Neil. Mark's mortgage payment, $2,400. Neil's mortgage payment, $2,400. The nanny for Emma, $1,200. The nanny for the twins, $1,200. Private school tuition for Emma, $3,000 per month. Private school tuition for the twins, $3,000 per month each. I pulled out my calculator and started adding. The monthly payments alone were $18,000, $216,000 per year. For the past 2 years, since Margaret died, I had been spending over $200,000 annually on my sons and their families. In total, I had given them or paid for on their behalf over $430,000 since Margaret's funeral. I thought about my father, who had worked double shifts at the lumber mill to send me to engineering school. I thought about Margaret, who had taken on extra seamstress work when the boys were young so we could afford their little league fees and summer camps. We had sacrificed our dreams, our comfort, our own desires because that's what parents do. We give everything so our children can have better lives. And now those children wanted to put me in a nursing home so they could have bigger houses. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee and a legal pad, and I began to plan. Not in anger, not in heat, but with the methodical precision I'd learned in 40 years of engineering. When you're designing an aircraft system, emotion will kill you. Every decision has to be based on facts, on careful calculation, on understanding exactly what will happen when you push each button. I wasn't angry. I was done. The next morning, I drove to my bank and requested a meeting with my financial advisor, Tom Rodriguez, who had been managing my retirement portfolio for 15 years. "Arthur, good to see you," Tom said, settling behind his desk. "What can I do for you today?" "I need to liquidate everything," I said calmly. "All of it. I want cash." Tom's smile faltered. "Everything? Arthur, that's not necessarily the best move from a tax perspective. Can you tell me what this is for? Maybe there's a better way to structure whatever you're planning." "I'm planning to disappear," I said. It took 4 days to convert my retirement accounts, savings, CDs, and investment portfolio into cash. $342,867. I kept it in a safe deposit box at a different bank across town. While the money was being processed, I started making other preparations. I called Mark's mortgage company and discovered something interesting. I wasn't just making his mortgage payments. I was listed as a co-signer on the loan. Same with Neil. In their eagerness to get bigger houses than they could actually afford, my sons had put my name on their loans. If I stopped making payments, it wouldn't just affect them. It would destroy my credit too. But here's the thing about being a co-signer that my boys had apparently forgotten. It gave me certain rights. I made an appointment with a real estate attorney. "Mr. Brown," the lawyer explained, "as a co-signer who's been making the payments, you have legal standing to request information about these properties. And if the primary borrowers default, you could potentially force a sale to recover your investment." I also called the private schools where I'd been paying tuition. Emma was at Lakeside Academy, the twins at Pacific Preparatory. Both schools required full payment by the 10th of each month. If payment was late, the students were placed on probationary status. If payment was missed entirely, they were withdrawn immediately. The nanny service was even simpler. I was the one who had set up the contracts and provided the credit card for automatic payments. All I had to do was cancel the service. On Thursday, I went to a real estate agent in a different part of the city, someone who wouldn't know my sons or ask questions about why I needed to sell quickly and quietly. My house was worth approximately $890,000. I told her I needed a cash sale within 2 weeks, and I was willing to accept $800,000 to make it happen. "Mr. Brown, are you sure about this timeline? We might be able to get you asking price if we give it a month or 2 on the market." 2 weeks, I repeated. "Cash offers only." That evening, I started removing things from the house. Not furniture, that would be obvious. But the valuable items, the things that mattered. I began with my stamp collection, carefully removing each album from the display case in my office. The 1918 inverted Jenny stamp alone was worth $8,000. I'd started collecting stamps when I was 12, and over 50 years, the collection had grown to be worth about $12,000. As I wrapped each album in tissue paper, I thought about how Mark had rolled his eyes when I tried to show it to Emma last Christmas. "Dad, kids don't care about old stamps," he'd said. From the garage, I took my father's tool chest, the red Craftsman box he'd bought in 1964 when he'd started working at Boeing. Every tool had been maintained, oiled, organized exactly the way he'd taught me. These weren't just tools. They were a connection to a man who'd understood the value of craftsmanship, of taking care of what you owned. Neil had borrowed the pneumatic drill 2 years ago for a job and returned it with a bent chuck. He'd shrugged when I pointed it out. "It still works, doesn't it?" Margaret's jewelry box sat on her dresser, untouched since the day she died. Inside was her grandmother's pearl necklace, the one she'd worn to our wedding. Her engagement ring, which I'd worked double shifts for 3 months to afford. The diamond earrings I'd given her for our 25th anniversary. Each piece held a memory, a moment of joy I'd been able to give her. I wrapped each item carefully, remembering her face when she'd first seen them. The silver service had been in Margaret's family for 4 generations. Her great-grandmother had carried it west during the Depression, selling piece by piece to survive, then somehow managing to buy it all back over the years. Margaret's mother had passed it to us on our wedding day with tears in her eyes. "This stays in the family," she'd whispered. When Jessica had admired it last Thanksgiving, Mark had joked, "Don't worry, it'll be yours someday," as if my death was just another business transaction to plan for. I found Margaret's photo albums in the cedar chest, hundreds of pictures documenting our life together. Our honeymoon in Victoria. The boys as babies. Christmas mornings. Birthdays. Graduations. I lingered over a picture of Margaret teaching 5-year-old Mark how to plant tomatoes in our first garden. In the photo, Mark was looking up at her with complete adoration, dirt smudged on his cheek. When had that little boy become a man who wanted to put his father in a nursing home? My father's retirement watch went into the box last. Boeing had presented it to him in 1987 after 37 years of faithful service. The inscription read, "William Brown, with gratitude for your dedication." He'd been so proud of that watch, had worn it every day until his death in 2003. "This will be yours someday," he told me. "And then your boys." A reminder of what honest work looks like. I worked methodically, one box at a time, storing everything in a storage unit I rented under a different name in Tacoma. Each item represented not just monetary value, but pieces of my life, my history, my connection to people who had genuinely loved me. If my sons were going to sell my house, they weren't getting everything in it. On Saturday, exactly 1 week after that Sunday dinner, I called Mark. "Dad, hi. How are you feeling about Wednesday? I confirmed your appointment at Sunset Manor for 10 o'clock. "I've been thinking about what you said," I replied. "About the house being too big for one person." "Oh, good. I'm glad you're coming around to the idea. Neil and I have been looking at some properties, and there are some really exciting options opening up." "I'm sure there are. Mark, I need to ask you something. When you bought your house, do you remember who co-signed the loan?" There was a pause. "You did, Dad. But that was just a formality, you know that. We've never missed a payment." "No," I said. "You've never missed a payment. Because I've been making them." "Well, yes, but we talked about that arrangement. You said you wanted to help us get established." "I did say that. Just like I said I'd help with the nanny and the private school and the monthly allowances. $6,000 a month, Mark. To you and your brother. For 2 years. Dad, we really appreciate everything you've done. That's why we want to make sure you're taken care of. Sunset Manor has a great reputation." I hung up without saying goodbye. On Monday morning, I called the mortgage companies for both houses. I informed them that I would no longer be making payments on either loan, effective immediately. I also requested that they send me copies of all loan documents, payment histories, and contact information for their legal departments. Tuesday, I canceled the automatic payments to the nanny service. Both families would find out when their nannies didn't show up for work on Thursday morning. Wednesday, instead of touring Sunset Manor, I met with the principals at both private schools. I explained that due to a family financial emergency, I could no longer cover tuition payments. Emma and the twins would need to be withdrawn immediately and enrolled in public school. Thursday morning at 9:30, my phone started ringing. "Dad, what the hell is going on?" Mark's voice was tight with panic. "Emma's school called and said they're withdrawing her unless we pay $12,000 by tomorrow. And Maria didn't show up this morning. They said the service was canceled." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said calmly. "Sorry to hear that? Dad, what did you do?" "I took your advice. I realized the house was too big for one person. In fact, I realized that supporting 2 adult families was too big for one person as well. Dad, you can't just stop paying for things. We have commitments, obligations. Emma has to go to school. Emma can go to public school. It's free." "Public school? Dad, we can't put Emma in public school. All her friends are at Lakeside. This will ruin her socially." "I went to public school. You went to public school. You both turned out fine." The line was quiet for a long moment. When Mark spoke again, his voice was different. Harder. "Dad, I think you're having some kind of episode. Maybe we should move up that nursing home tour." "I don't think so, Mark. I'm thinking more clearly than I have in years." I hung up. Neil called an hour later. "Dad, we need to talk. This thing with the nanny service, and now the mortgage company is calling us about missed payments. What's happening?" "What's happening is that I'm liquidating my assets and preparing for my move to senior living, just like you boys suggested." "But Dad, you can't just stop making the mortgage payments. You're a cosigner. This affects your credit too." "I'm aware of that, Neil. I'm also aware that as a co-signer who's been making 100% of your mortgage payments, I have certain legal rights regarding your property. What are you talking about? I'm talking about the fact that if you default on these loans, I can force a sale of both houses to recover my investment. I've been making your payments for 18 months. Neil, that's $43,200. For Mark's house, it's $43,200. Plus the down payments I gave you both. That's a significant financial investment in properties I don't even live in. You can't be serious. Dead serious. Oh, and Neil, that cruise I mentioned wanting to take? I'm leaving for Alaska on Monday. I'll be gone for 3 weeks. When I get back, I expect both of your families to have made alternative arrangements for childcare and education. The line was quiet for a moment. Then Neil's voice came back. Different now. Desperate. Dad, listen to me. I know you're upset about the nursing home thing, but you're not thinking clearly. You're hurting innocent people here. Emma didn't do anything wrong. The twins didn't do anything wrong. They're just kids. You're right, I said. They are just kids. Kids whose parents need to figure out how to support them. Dad, please. You know Sandra's been out of work since the twins were born. I'm doing everything I can, but construction work is unpredictable. We need your help. You needed my help, I corrected. Past tense. What you wanted was my house. That's not fair. We were thinking about your future, your safety. My safety. I laughed, and it came out bitter. Neil, I'm 63 years old, not 93. I'm in perfect health. I can drive, I can cook, I can manage my own finances. The only danger I was in was the danger of being manipulated by my own children. Dad, you're talking like we're strangers. We're your family. Family, I repeated. Neil, when was the last time you called me just to see how I was doing? Not to ask for money, not to arrange something for the grandchildren. Just to talk. The silence stretched on for nearly a minute. That's what I thought, I said. And Neil? Don't call this number again unless someone is dying. Actually dying, not financially dying. I hung up the phone and turned off the ringer. That Friday, the real estate agent called. She had a cash offer for $780,000, with a closing date in 10 days. I accepted. Over the weekend, both sons came to the house. Together, this time with their wives. I met them at the door but didn't invite them in. Dad, we need to talk about this reasonably, Mark said. You're putting Emma and the boys in a terrible position. You're putting your children in this position, I replied. Not me. Jessica stepped forward. Arthur, we had an understanding. You said you wanted to help the family. I said I wanted to help the family. I've helped to the tune of over $400,000 in the past 2 years. Now the family wants to help me by putting me in a nursing home and selling my house. So I'm helping myself. This is insane, Sandra said. You can't just abandon your grandchildren. I'm not abandoning anyone. I'm simply no longer subsidizing your lifestyle choices. You want bigger houses? Buy them yourselves. You want private schools? Pay for them yourselves. You want full-time nannies? Hire them yourselves. Neil was getting red in the face. Dad, you're being incredibly selfish. We're your family. Family, I repeated. Tell me. Neil, when was the last time you called me when you didn't need money? He opened his mouth, then closed it. When was the last time any of you invited me to dinner at your house? When was the last time you asked how I was doing, what I was thinking about, whether I was lonely in this big house? We invited you to move to Sunset Manor, Mark said weakly. You informed me I was moving to Sunset Manor. You'd already picked it out, already made the appointment, already decided how to spend the money from selling my home. You didn't ask what I wanted. You told me what you decided was best for all of us. I looked at my sons, at their wives, at the panic in their eyes as they realized their financial foundation was crumbling. The house closes on Tuesday, I said. I'm moving out Monday morning. I suggest you spend this weekend figuring out your new living arrangements. Where are you going? Mark asked. Sunset Manor, I said. Just like you suggested. I closed the door. Monday morning, the moving truck arrived at 7 a.m. I wasn't taking much, Just my personal belongings, some furniture, the few things I hadn't already moved to storage. By noon, the house was empty except for the items I was leaving for the new owners. I drove to the bank, collected my cash from the safe deposit box, and headed south on I-5. I didn't stop until I reached Portland, Oregon, 273 miles from Seattle. I chosen Portland carefully. It was far enough away that I wouldn't accidentally run into anyone from my old life, but close enough that if there was a real emergency, if one of my grandchildren was truly in danger, I could get there in a few hours. I bought a small house in the Hawthorne district for $160,000. Cash. No mortgage, no cosigners, no monthly payments. I furnished it simply, hung Margaret's pictures on the walls, and set up my father's tools in the garage. For the first time in 2 years, I was sleeping through the night. 3 weeks later, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Mark's number. "Dad, where are you? We've been looking everywhere." "I'm exactly where you suggested I should be," I said. "In a senior living situation. Dad, please. We've lost both houses. We're staying with friends, but we can't keep doing this. The kids are sleeping on couches. Emma is going to public school and she's miserable. We need your help. You have jobs," I said. "You have educations that I paid for. You have skills and experience. Figure it out. Dad, please. We know we made a mistake. We shouldn't have suggested the nursing home thing. We were just thinking about finances, about the future. We weren't thinking about how it would make you feel." I sat in my new living room, looking out the window at the garden I was planning to plant. A garden Margaret would have loved. "Mark, let me ask you something. If I hadn't been paying your mortgage for the past 18 months, where would you be living? We would have figured something out. Figure it out now." "But Dad, we can't afford the kinds of places we need. Not without help. We have children to think about." I had children to think about too. I thought about them for 63 years. I thought about them when I sold my father's car to pay for college tuition. I thought about them when I worked overtime to afford little league and piano lessons and summer camps. I thought about them when I postponed my retirement to help with down payments on houses. I thought about them when I gave up the European vacation your mother wanted so we could pay for weddings. My voice was steady, calm, but there was something final in it that Mark must have heard. "We can work this out," he said desperately. "We can sit down as a family and figure out a fair arrangement." We did sit down as a family, Mark. You told me I was selling my house and moving to a nursing home so you could use the money for bigger houses. That was your idea of a fair arrangement. Dad, that was a mistake. We were wrong. We want to make it right. You can't make this right. You revealed who you really are. You showed me exactly how much my happiness and dignity were worth to you. They were worth whatever you could get for my house after you stuck me in Sunset Manor. I paused, looking at a photo of Margaret on the mantel. She was laughing in the picture, her head thrown back, completely joyful. I'd taken it on our honeymoon 41 years ago. I'm starting over, Mark. I'm 63 years old, and I'm finally going to live the life I want to live. Not the life I'm supposed to live for other people's benefit. What about us? What about the grandchildren? What about you? You're adults. You have 2 good incomes, marketable skills, and healthy children. You'll be fine. And if we're not fine? I thought about that question for a long moment. Then you'll learn what I learned, I said finally. That sometimes the people you love the most will hurt you the deepest. And when that happens, you have a choice. You can keep letting them hurt you, or you can walk away and build something better. I hung up the phone and turned off the ringer. 6 months later, I was in the garden when my new neighbor, Helen, waved from her porch. Helen was 71, a retired librarian whose husband had passed away 3 years earlier. We'd been having coffee together most mornings for the past month. "Arthur, there's someone on your front porch," she called. I walked around to the front of the house and found Neil standing by my door, holding a manila envelope. He looked tired, older somehow. He was wearing a uniform shirt with Dave's Construction embroidered on the pocket. "Hello, Neil. Dad." He looked around at my small house, at the flower beds I'd planted, at the porch swing where I sat most evenings. "This is nice. Thank you." I've been looking for you for 4 months. I know. We stood there for a moment, neither of us quite sure what to say. Can we sit down? Neil asked finally. I gestured to the porch swing. We sat, leaving space between us. The house is gone, Neil said. Both houses. Mark and I are both renting small apartments now. Jessica went back to work full-time. Sandra's watching the twins while I work construction. I nodded but didn't say anything. The kids are in public school. They're adjusting, but it's been hard. Especially for Emma. Public school didn't kill you or Mark, I said. It won't kill her either. Neil handed me the manila envelope. This is for you. Inside were 3 handwritten letters. One from Mark, one from Jessica, and one from Emma. I read Emma's first. Dear Grandpa Arthur. It began in her careful 8-year-old handwriting. I miss you. I'm sorry we were mean about your house. I liked our Sunday dinners. Can you come back? Love, Emma. Mark's letter was longer, full of apologies and explanations and promises to do better. Jessica's was similar. I folded the letters and put them back in the envelope. They mean it, Dad, Neil said. We all mean it. We know we screwed up. You did. So where does that leave us? I looked at my son, this man I'd raised and loved and sacrificed for, and I felt something I hadn't expected. Not forgiveness exactly, but not hatred either. Something more like pity. It leaves you living your own life, I said. Making your own choices, paying your own bills, taking care of your own responsibilities. What about family? What about the kids? The kids will be fine. They have parents who love them. You'll figure out how to give them what they need without someone else paying for it. Neil was quiet for a long time. When he spoke again, his voice was small. Do you hate us? No, I said, and I was surprised to realize it was true. I don't hate you, but I don't trust you either. And I don't owe you anything anymore. So this is it? You're just going to stay here and pretend you don't have a family. I have a family, I said, thinking of Helen, of the friends I was making in my photography class, of the volunteer work I'd started at the animal shelter. I have a family that chooses to spend time with me because they enjoy my company, not because they need my money. Neil stood up. The kids ask about you. Tell them Grandpa is doing well in his new living situation. Tell them exactly what you told me, that this was the best thing for everyone. He walked to his truck, then turned back. Dad, are you happy? I thought about my morning coffee with Helen, about the photography class where I was learning to capture light the way Margaret used to talk about it, about the small orange cat I'd adopted from the shelter who slept on my bed every night. Yes, I said. For the first time in years, I'm happy. Neil drove away and I never saw him again. That was 3 years ago. I'm 66 now, and my life has settled into a rhythm that suits me. Helen and I take day trips to the coast. I'm taking a pottery class at the community college. I volunteer at the animal shelter 3 mornings a week. My small house is exactly the right size for 1 person and 1 cat. Sometimes I think about Mark and Neil and my grandchildren. I wonder if Emma still remembers our Sunday dinners, if the twins ever ask about the grandfather who used to pay for their private school. But I don't wonder enough to pick up the phone. I don't wonder enough to drive back to Seattle. They wanted me in a nursing home so they could have bigger houses. Now they have smaller houses and I have exactly the life I want. Turns out their plan worked perfectly, just not the way they thought it would. If you liked this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel and share your impressions in the comments below.